It just appeared in the middle of town one day. Applejack saw it on her way home, but she was in a hurry. She caught a brief glimpse of it. The perfectly smooth sides, card charcoal gray precise, but all that she saw, the single look out of the corner of her eye as she galloped past. Her mind was just another thing in town filled with things. By evening, half the town was gathered around it. They had seen it by now, and had passed it on their very home like Applejack, or had caught a glimpse of it through an open window. They circled it, speaking in hushed tones, as if they were afraid they might awaken it. A brand new oddity for an already rather odd town. Monolith, some pony likely Twilight said. Very few of them knew what that word meant, only the feeling it gave them as it rippled through the crowd, a very strange and very slight sense of vertigo. They all felt it, although no pony said a word, as they let it pass over them. As quickly as it come, it lifted like a cloud. They forgot an illusion, forgot who had said monolith, forgot who they knew what it meant. They just stared at the structure before them, wondering where it had come from. Twilight had stepped forward as princess. She thought it was about time to take control. She opened her mouth to make a speech, something light but cautionary. The words flopped out of her loose and clumsy. They spilled from her like water from a burst pipe, insincere and nonsensical. She could feel the monolith pulsing in behind her, throbbing and humming as the useless syllables crawled out from her mouth. Twilight's gaze was drawn upon it. Even she struggled to keep the crowd's attention. It was just so beautiful, beautiful and unknowable. The space beyond the void, in its darkness, she could see the entire universe. Looking deeper, Twilight can see a deep void of which creatures and malevolent and impossible poured from a steady stream. The colors swerved and pulsed, much like the words she was failing to speak. She reached out to touch it. She was still speaking, but the static in her head had drowned out her words. They were words? Twilight was barely conscious for her mouth moving, let alone what was coming out of it. She could only feel the monolith, only not its steady hum. Lyra's heartstrings first got there. She reached to touch it, to feel its calming hum on her hoof. Lyra vanished right before her eyes. One moment she was reaching to touch the monolith, the next she had disappeared. There was no fanfare, no muffled pop, to whoosh or scream, or sharp intake of air. There was just the space where she had begun. The final image of her burned into her eyes. They all saw it, the expression of fear on Lyra's face as she reached out to the monolith. Her eyes filled with tears, the way her hoof shook, the sheer terror that darted across her face a split second before she vanished. They saw it, but many of them did not comprehend what they had seen. They all stood there for a good minute, in awe of what was before them. As swiftly as it was seen, it was forgotten. But then the crowd broke apart. They've all felt it simultaneously, like after effects of a tremor, a burst of static inside their heads, high-pitched and grating against the insides of their skulls. This wasn't fear. It was something harsh and primal, a long-buried instinct awakened by the droning hum. Days passed. Ponies began to disappear. Every pony knew it was the monolith. The hum, slow and steady, rippled through their bones. They always knew that when some pony had been taken. The hum told them. Doors were locked. Windows were bolted. Entrances and exits were barricaded from inside. Communication with the outside world ceased entirely, as ponies' fears of attracting distant relatives or loved ones to town. The streets empty out. The hum followed Applejack to her dreams. The inside of her head vibrated, her skull aching with a headache that never seemed to go away. Perhaps being somewhat far from town helped in a way, but the agonizing throbbing in her skull was the price she paid. She didn't know what had happened to her friends. Applejack tried not to think of it, tried to make herself calm as she shook the inside of her head. One night she found Apple Bloom in the kitchen. The little filly had wandered out of bed at some point, despite Applejack having seen her fast asleep less than 5 minutes ago. Apple Bloom had descended the stairs to silent hooves, or perhaps to hum that drowned out her hoof steps. Either way, Applejack found her little sister fiddling with the latch on the kitchen door. Applejack sprang forward, a cry of alarm spilling from her mouth. She tackled Apple Bloom to the ground, wrapping herself tightly around the little filly's body. She hoped the shock would render Apple Bloom motionless for at least a few seconds, but Apple Bloom immediately began thrashing around. But the more she tried to escape Applejack's grip, the tighter her sister held on. "No!" Apple Bloom screamed. "It wants me! I have to go to it! It wants me!" Applejack was taken aback by Apple Bloom's strength. She was actually struggling to hold the much smaller pony in place, but she refused to relent, pressing Apple Bloom down with all of her strength, even as Apple Bloom tried to wiggle her hooves from Applejack's grip. Even as Apple Bloom shrieked and pleaded, Applejack held on. She held on because she could see the terror in her sister's eyes and the tears streaming down her face, her desperation even as if she struggled so vehemently against Applejack's grip. She knew what would happen if she touched a monolith. They all did, but it was too beautiful, too alluring, so unknowable and fascinating. It held the dreams hostage. Truly it was the most beautiful structure of all of Equestria. A slight worry of the princess's blessing. Applejack's grip slackened for a split second, and her mind filled with the monolith. It was there for her. The monolith had come for her and left her alone, and she needed to go with it. It was calling to her, beckoning her, wanting her to cross the whole life of death. In that split second, Apple Bloom broke out of Applejack's grip. She slammed her back hooves against the door, the wood splintering and breaking from the impact. Another blow caused the door to fly open, the flimsy locks and chains clattering to the door. Then, the unusually strong filly was gone, bolting through the empty doorway. She needed to get to the monolith, and if it had come here for her, she needed to go to it. Her head clear from the first time in weeks, Applejack immediately threw herself through the open doorway. She raced towards Apple Bloom's retreating figure, shouting out for her sister's name as she galloped. But Apple Bloom had a hard head start and already knew exactly where she was going. In mere moments, Apple Bloom had already reached the edge of the farm and completely disappeared from view. By the time Applejack got to the monolith, it was too late. Apple Bloom was gone. Applejack stood before the monolith, stood there helpless and angry as she stared at the uncaring structure before her. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to believe her sister and had just been taken. Apple Bloom had been taken just like Granny Smith and Big Macintosh a few days ago. They all thought they were safe out there on the farm. Perhaps they had been, but the hum had gotten them at the end. She raised a hoof. Applejack was the only one left, the last apple in Ponyville. She couldn't imagine what had happened to her friends. Perhaps she was the only one left in town, the final one to be summoned by the monolith. But even as the anger welled up inside her, Applejack found something admiring at the monolith, so radiant, so wondrous and filled with secrets. It spoke to her through the hum, its voice almost indistinguishable from the drowning, but from somehow Applejack knew that it was saying. Its words filled her with primal fear, yet she stepped closer to the monolith. She reached out to touch it, almost choking on her sobs. No pony was there to see Applejack disappear. No pony was there to see the strongest ponies in Ponyville break down, whispering her sister's name one last time before she was taken. 2 days later, the monolith disappeared. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.